The waiter set the black leather folder beside my father's plate, not mine, and my father tapped it with 2 fingers like he had been waiting all night for that sound. My sister already had her phone raised, recording the table, while 16 relatives smiled over half-empty champagne flutes and plates streaked with Wagyu fat. My mother leaned toward me and said, softly enough for the video to catch it, "This is how you start making amends." I called the waiter back, bent close so only he could hear me, and whispered, "Bring your manager and the signed payment authorization. If my name is on it, it's forged. My name is Natalie Greer. I'm 33 years old." What I thought was a humiliating family ambush turned out to be the first loose thread in a paper trail they had been building against me for months. I had not spoken to my parents in 3 years. Not after the last Christmas, when my father told everyone I had abandoned the family because I refused to co-sign a loan for my younger sister, Kelsey. Not after my mother mailed back every birthday card unopened but still texted me whenever she needed a password, an insurance document, or a copy of my tax return for family records. Not after I realized that in my family, forgiveness always came with an invoice. So when my mother, Marlene Greer, called me crying on a Tuesday afternoon and said she had started therapy, I didn't believe her at first. "I don't want to die with my daughters divided," she said. That sentence got through me. Not because I trusted her. Because I wanted to. She told me to meet them Friday night at Lark Stone, a steakhouse downtown where people went for anniversaries, not apologies. She said it would be just immediate family. She said nobody wanted drama. When I walked in, there were 16 people at the private table. Aunts, uncles, cousins. Kelsey, in a satin blouse, phone already pointed at me. My father, Grant Greer, sitting at the head of the table like a judge who had already ruled. And the food was already there. Not appetizers. Not drinks. Full Wagyu tasting boards. Seafood towers. 3 bottles of champagne in silver buckets. A 4th being opened as I took off my coat. My mother stood and hugged me hard enough to perform affection, not feel it. "You came," she whispered. Then she guided me to the only empty chair, directly across from my father. For the first 20 minutes, nobody mentioned the past. They toasted healing. They talked about how expensive therapy was. Kelsey kept filming little clips, asking people to say what family meant to them. Then my father cleared his throat. "Before we move forward," he said, "Natalie needs to show she understands what her choices cost this family." I looked at my mother. She would not meet my eyes. My uncle laughed awkwardly. "It's symbolic, Nat. Don't make it weird." That was when the waiter brought the bill. My father unfolded the receipt slowly. $5,842.17. He slid it toward me. At the bottom, someone had written in blue pen, "Paid by Natalie Greer per agreement." My stomach went cold in a way I can still feel. "I didn't agree to this," I said. Kelsey lowered her phone just enough to smirk. "Mom said you wanted to make things right." My father tapped the receipt again. "Your card is on file." That was the first moment I understood this was not just cruelty. This was paperwork. The manager arrived with a polite, nervous expression and a clipboard pressed to his chest. I asked him exactly what authorization he had. He hesitated, then said a private dining agreement had been submitted online 2 days earlier under my name. Under my name. With my email misspelled by 1 letter. With a scanned copy of an old driver's license I had lost years earlier. And with a signature at the bottom that looked like mine if you had only ever seen it on a Christmas card. The manager lowered his voice. "Ms. Greer, the card we have is not yours. It belongs to Mr. Grant Greer. But the agreement states you are the responsible guarantor." My father's face changed. Just for 1 second. Not fear exactly. Recognition. Like he realized I had asked the one question he hoped I would be too embarrassed to ask. I took a photo of the document before anyone could stop me. Then I saw the second page. It wasn't just a dinner contract. It was titled Family Reconciliation Reimbursement Statement. And beneath the fake signature was a notary stamp from my Aunt Denise Porter. My own aunt. The woman sitting 3 chairs away, suddenly very interested in her wine glass. The manager looked like he wanted the floor to open under him. My Aunt Denise was a notary. Everyone in the family knew that, because she mentioned it the way some people mentioned military service or marathon medals. She notarized school forms, car titles, church paperwork. She had notarized my first apartment lease when I was 22. Now her stamp was on a document saying I had agreed to reimburse my family for a luxury apology dinner I had never planned, never approved, and never even known existed. I looked at her. Aunt Denise, I said, did you notarize my signature? The table went quiet. Kelsey's phone was still recording. Denise dabbed the corner of her mouth with a napkin. Natalie, this is not the place. That's a yes or no question. My father leaned back. Don't interrogate your aunt. I didn't raise my voice. That mattered later. I'm asking whether a licensed notary verified my identity for a document signed 2 days ago, when I was at work across town. My cousin Mark muttered. Here we go. My mother finally spoke. Honey, please. We didn't bring you here to fight. No, I said. You brought me here to pay. That landed harder than I expected. The manager shifted beside me. Ms. Greer, to be clear, we have not charged anyone yet. The card on file was to hold the reservation. My father's head snapped toward him. The manager continued more carefully. Because there appears to be a dispute over authorization, we cannot process payment under the agreement until ownership is verified. My sister stopped filming. I smiled at her. No, keep going. You wanted a memory. Kelsey's face flushed. You're making everyone uncomfortable. Good. My father pushed his chair back an inch. You have always loved humiliating this family. I laughed once, not because it was funny, but because that sentence had been the wallpaper of my childhood. If I set a boundary, I was humiliating them. If I told the truth, I was embarrassing them. If I asked a question, I was attacking. I turned back to the manager. May I have copies of everything submitted under my name? We'll need to consult corporate. Of course, I said. Then please preserve all records, emails, IP logs, uploaded IDs, payment notes, and surveillance footage related to this reservation. My father's face lost color. That was the second loose thread. Most innocent people don't react to the phrase surveillance footage like someone just opened a trap door. My mother whispered, Natalie, stop. I looked at her then. Really looked. She had done her makeup carefully. Pearl earrings. Soft pink lipstick. The blouse I bought her 5 years ago for Mother's Day, back when I still believed expensive gifts could purchase peace. There were tears in her eyes, but they weren't remorse. They were strategy. Mom, I said, who filled out the form? She blinked too quickly. I don't know. Who uploaded my old license? No answer. Who wrote that reimbursement statement? My Uncle Ron threw his napkin onto the table. For God's sake, it's a dinner. Pay it. And move on. You make good money. There it was. The real prayer at the center of every family gathering. Natalie makes good money. Not Natalie is happy. Not Natalie is safe. Not Natalie deserves an apology. Just, Natalie has money, so Natalie should absorb the damage. I stood up. Every head at the table followed me. I am not paying this bill, I said. I am not responsible for a contract I didn't sign. And if anyone here used my identification or forged my name, I will report it. My father stood too. He was still tall, still broad-shouldered, still capable of making a room shrink around him. When I was 15, that posture made me apologize for things I hadn't done. At 33, it just made me sad. You walk out that door, he said, and you are done. I picked up my coat. I was done 3 years ago. You invited me back to invoice me. Kelsey scoffed. You're so dramatic. I leaned over the table and took one last photo. The bill, the reimbursement page, Denise's notary stamp, my father's hand half covering the fake signature. Then I said to the manager, "Please charge whatever was actually ordered by the people who ordered it. If they refuse, call the police. I'll wait in the lobby as a witness." That was when my Aunt Denise stood so fast her chair hit the wall. "Natalie," she said, voice shaking, "don't do that." For the first time all night she looked frightened. Not embarrassed. Frightened. And that was when I knew the dinner was only the smallest crime on the table. I followed Aunt Denise into the hallway outside the private dining room. She kept glancing back at the table like my father might appear, and dragged the truth out of her by force. "What did you notarize?" I asked. Her lips trembled. "I thought it was just family paperwork." That is not an answer." She pressed one hand to her chest. "Your mother said you had agreed, but you were too busy to come in person. Grant brought your ID copy. He said you'd given permission." A notary can't verify identity because someone's father says so." Her face crumpled. That was all the answer I needed. "How many documents, Denise?" She closed her eyes. "How many?" 3, she whispered. My hearing narrowed, like the restaurant noise had been pulled underwater. What documents?" "I didn't read all of them." You stamped them?" "I know." What were they?" She swallowed. "One was for tonight. One was a statement about previous support they gave you. And one was a letter for your employer." My blood went ice cold. "My employer?" Denise started crying then, quiet and ugly, no performance in it. "Grant said you were trying to get promoted and that it would help if your company knew your family was stable again. Marlene said it was just a character letter." I worked in compliance for a financial software company. A forged letter to my employer wasn't embarrassing. It was dangerous. "What did it say?" I asked. "I don't know exactly." Denise." She wiped her face. "It mentioned financial responsibility. Repayment. That you were voluntarily resolving family debts." I stared at her. There were no family debts. Unless they were trying to create them. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. An email notification. Subject line, urgent. Documentation received regarding outside financial obligation from HR. Sent 12 minutes ago. My hands went numb as I opened it. "Natalie, we received a notarized statement tonight, alleging you have an undisclosed personal financial liability connected to a family reimbursement agreement. Because of your role and access level, please confirm receipt. We may need to discuss tomorrow morning." Attached was a scan. My signature. Denise's stamp. A paragraph claiming I had accepted responsibility for $42,000 in family loans and reconciliation expenses, and had failed to disclose it during annual compliance certification. I looked through the glass wall of the private room. My father was watching me. Not angrily anymore. Calmly. He had already sent it. This wasn't about dinner. This was leverage. If I paid quietly, the problem disappeared. If I refused, they threatened my job with forged debt paperwork. My mother stood beside him, wringing her hands. Kelsey held her phone at chest height again. I lifted my own phone and took a screenshot of the HR email, then forwarded it to my personal attorney. I had hired Rachel Kim 2 years ago, after my parents tried to claim me as a dependent on amended tax forms. Rachel had told me then, "People like this don't stop because you explain. They stop because consequences become expensive." I called her. She answered on the second ring. "Natalie?" "I'm at Lark Stone." My family forged my signature on a private dining contract, a reimbursement statement, and a letter to my employer claiming I owe them $42,000. A short silence. Then Rachel's voice sharpened. "Are you safe?" Yes. Good. Do not argue with them. Do not sign anything. Ask the restaurant to preserve records. Get names. Then leave. I think the notary is confessing." Denise made a tiny wounded sound. Rachel said, "Do not take a confession in a hallway. Put me on speaker." I did. Rachel introduced herself, her voice calm enough to scare people. She asked Denise if she was willing to state, voluntarily, whether Natalie Greer appeared before her on the date of notarization. Denise whispered, "No." "Br, did you witness Natalie Greer sign any of the documents?" "No." "Did anyone instruct or pressure you to notarize them anyway?" Denise looked back toward the dining room. My father had started walking toward us. Rachel said, "Ms. Porter, answer only if you feel safe." Denise whispered, "Grant did." My father opened the hallway door. "What the hell is this?" he said. I took the phone off speaker and stepped back. "This," I said, "is the moment you stop talking to me and start talking to my lawyer." His jaw tightened. Behind him, my mother began crying louder, the way she did when she wanted witnesses. But nobody moved to comfort her. Because the manager had returned with 2 security guards. And in his hand was a printed reservation packet showing the email address used to book the room. Not mine. My father's. The manager handed the packet to my lawyer by email, not to me. Rachel insisted on that. "Chain of custody," she said through my phone. "If they're sloppy enough to forge a notary, they're sloppy enough to claim Natalie altered the documents." My father heard that. His nostrils flared. The reservation packet showed everything. The private room had been booked from my father's personal email. The uploaded ID file was named natalisensold.jpg. The reimbursement statement had been uploaded 7 minutes later from the same IP address. The restaurant had never had my card. My father had lied about that part, just to make me panic. The $5,842.17 bill was still unpaid. The manager, now very formal, said, "Mr. Greer, the card provided for the reservation belongs to you. Unless another guest voluntarily pays, we will process your card." My father looked at the private room, where 16 relatives suddenly found the tablecloth fascinating. "You all heard her," he said. "She agreed to fix this." No one answered. Not even Kelsey. I watched the old machinery fail in real time. For years, my father's confidence had worked because everyone around him supplied the missing facts. He declared, they nodded. He accused, they echoed. He punished, they called it family values. But a restaurant manager, 2 security guards, and a lawyer on speaker were not part of his system. My mother stepped forward, crying softly, "Natalie, please don't ruin your father." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because she still thought I was the weapon in the room. "Mom," I said, "he sent forged financial documents to my employer." Her crying paused for half a second. Enough. Enough to tell me she had known. Rachel's voice came through my phone. "Natalie, ask whether any other third parties received documents." I repeated the question. My father said nothing. My mother looked down. Kelsey's face changed. I turned to her. "What did you send?" She hugged her phone to her chest. "Nothing." "Kelsey." "It wasn't me." "What did you send?" Her eyes darted toward Dad, then Mom. And then, because Kelsey had always survived by switching teams at the exact moment the old one started losing, she said, "Dad told me to make a video." My stomach dropped. What video?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then whispered, "A reconciliation video. For the GoFundMe." The hallway went silent. Even Rachel stopped speaking. My Aunt Denise covered her mouth. I said, "What GoFundMe?" Kelsey's voice shook. "They said it was temporary. They said you'd come around and we could take it down." She pulled up the page. There I was. A cropped photo from my LinkedIn profile. If this story stayed with you, tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. And if you want more stories like this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel.